If you listen to my past video in this series, then you might not be surprised by what I'm about to tell you, and that is an unfortunate truth and a tragedy if you ask me. This is a tale that's all too common. You are at the most vulnerable time in your life, around your teenage years, vulnerable to abuse and bullying, which is when they are most likely to occur. And as I said, this is unfortunately all too common. Now, if you listen to my previous video, you'll know that I was bullied through my pre-teenage years and then through my teenage years. This left me, feeling utterly miserable and depressed most of the time. Didn't feel like I had any control, had no idea what the future would be. And this led me to self-harm and 2 attempted suicides, which are still very painful and raw to think about to this day. But I'm going to share those stories with you. And before I get to these stories that I'm going to tell you, I'd like to structure this video a little differently. I would like to offer you some advice first. In my life, I had a negative force that was a person in my life who led me to these things. And if you have someone like that in your life as well, you need to be able to either cut them out or be as strong and resistant to them as you can be. You're going to have your own battles with your inner voice that may tell you you're not good enough and may take you to dark places, but you can never let someone who's on the outside of you say these things to you. They can never be that force, because it is a very powerful and dangerous force to have someone else lead you to these places. I do not think I would have ever self-harmed or attempted suicide if it wasn't for this other person in my life. And so for me, from where I'm coming from, I think that is extremely important to recognize if it's coming from the outside and get that person out of your life. If you are depressed or having suicidal thoughts, you do not need to feel like a weirdo, like there's something wrong with you for feeling this way. You'd never be a weirdo for me. I understand what it's like to go to these places because life can be crushing, and in these dark places, what you need is support. What got me through my ordeals was that I actually had friends that I could talk to and trust, and having them know your story and having them give you their support is incredibly helpful. It's really meaningful, and it's what most people will need when they find themselves in these dark places. You should reach out to someone and confide and ask for help if you are dealing with these thoughts. Now, I've heard the stories, I've read them online, that people reach out and they can be failed. And if that happens, the important thing is that you must keep seeking help, because it is very difficult to find a solution within yourself. And the support of other people is paramount. And to put your trust in someone else is your strength. Even if it's misplaced or you are betrayed, you should not fear asking for help. But you should think carefully about who you do reach out to. So in the description box down below, I'm going to provide some links to reading material, places where you can get help. If you didn't know, there are hotlines that you can call in anonymously on. So if you do feel like there is no one in your life that you can reach out to, there are people out there in the world that want to support and help you. And so go to the description box down below to find that material. So before I tell you my story, I just want to reiterate something from a previous video. In some other words, as I've kind of said, life itself is change, it's ongoing change, and brighter days will come from wherever you are now. Just know whatever situation you're in doesn't have to be permanent. There can be brighter days ahead. Now, as I've sort of already stated, my journey into self-harm and suicide started with a nefarious person in my life who was intentionally introducing these things to me, putting the knife in my hand and telling me to mutilate myself. Now, how it felt at the time is a very bizarre thing to look back on. I'm not sure if it was peer pressure, if I felt some sort of sense of control over my own pain and misery through mutilating myself. I don't know if it was a cry for help or maybe something else, but I do know is that it was dangerous. We were sharing blades and knives, and I was doing ridiculous things like picking glass off of the floor to cut myself in need for this something that I thought it was giving me at the time, which turned out to be very hollow. And that was a rather dangerous experience. That glass could have had any kind of germ or disease or something that could have made that night very ill-fated. What ended up happening is that my clothes got soaked in blood and I ended up just passing out. Um, I am incredibly fortunate, I think, sometimes to have gotten through this stuff. Now, this same person who was pushing terrible ideas onto me got me to participate in a suicide pact. Of course, I made the decision on my own, but I was led to this point by this other person, which is why I said if you have anyone like this in your life, you need to cut them out of your life. This person fed off of my weakness and constantly pushed me to do dangerous and terrible things to myself and to other people as well. And eventually I did manage to get out of this. And the way in which I did get out of it was with the support of a friend who was also influenced by this person, and we both decided to cut them out, and that was one of the best decisions that I'd ever made. Now, later on, at another low point, feeling helpless and powerless to what was happening at school every single day, to me, I one school night slashed my own wrists and passed out, and woke up covered in blood and had to clean myself up and go back to school again. And it was awful, and that was the last time I ever attempted something like that. I mean, I'd certainly hit lower points in my life, but somewhere along the line I realized this would never be an answer. Of course, I do want to live. One of the things about attempting suicide or having suicidal thoughts is that you do actually want to live. What you want is happiness. What you want is to have these horrible things in your life removed. And suicide isn't the answer. And I think I knew that. I had this horrible person pushing me to do things that I eventually grew out of. Now, I don't remember precisely why or when I stopped cutting, but it just kind of became something that I didn't need anymore, and I think it was because I pushed that person out of my life. And I know that suicidal thoughts would roam around in my mind for many years after this, but they would never have the same power over me again. I knew it was never a solution, and so whenever those kind of thoughts were there, I would always have something to push back and be resistant against them. So thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that they provide you with some sort of strength or comfort or something to take away. And again, in the description box down below are some resources if you want to read into this further, or maybe look up a hotline if you feel like you need to talk to someone. So thanks for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.